Welcome to the Long Haul Fitness. My name is Nick Bagley, as always. I'm your host. And today I got my boy Ray Baker with me. He is a trainer at Destination Dallas with me. That's how we've known each other for the last, I've been there 2 years now. So for the last 2 years, we have been co-workers, I guess. So Ray, tell us a little about yourself, how you got into this, what you do for a living, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess speaking about competition, I've been working with athletes since 2010, end of 2010, 2011. It's been a very long and exciting journey. Throughout this time, I've utilized so many different methods of doing things. I've thankfully not been too subject to any specific one of them, just because after a little bit of time, I could see all the positives, or initially I could see all the positives from it. But after a little bit of time, the drawbacks from the method would start becoming more glaring than not. And it's made for an exciting process just to continue to learn and evolve this entire time. I got the way I've done things has changed as recently as months ago for some situations, just because when you start working with new athletes and new bodies, it might dictate a different process based on their experience, especially if they're 100%. A high-end athlete, somebody who has a good structure, strong foundation naturally, and their body has a little bit more dictation in how it would like to move. But scaling back now, before that, I owned 2 supplement stores, 2 Ultimate Sport Nutritions. One of them was in the old Destination. The other one was in Dallas. That was actually my dream. I was going to UNT for biology and finishing up my last semester. I had a buddy say, "Hey, you want to buy half this store?" And instead of wondering why he's asking me and why the other owner was trying to do it, I was fucking excited to do it. The call was like at 2:00 in the morning, so that should have been another fucking red flag.
Yeah, that should have been a red flag off the bat.
I had to sleep, and I was like, "What's up, man?" Like thinking something was wrong. And he's like, "Hey, man, you want to buy Dallas?" And I'm like, "Yes." Okay, he's like, "Okay, I'll call you tomorrow." Like, and I went to sleep so excited. I'm like, "Oh, yes." And then school became not an option at that point because I had to be at the store all day long. But I loved it, and it caused me, I learned a lot of the ins and outs of the sport nutrition industry. I met with supplement companies. I was able to see facilities. I was able to get an idea of how clean some of this stuff actually is. And that itself created a big impact on how I work with people now, and I don't utilize too many supplements just because of that issue. It's hard to keep supplements quality, and it's very difficult to ensure that you're getting exactly what you want. And then at the end of the day, it becomes something your body has to clean up. So if it's not what we need and it's just added powders to kidneys that are already annoyed, then for me, it's been proven to avoid it rather than guess with it.
Sure. Yeah. And it's funny, we have a similar background there because I worked for Complete Nutrition throughout college, was a store manager, and they were trying to sell me a store for a while. And I ended up asking more questions, so they were trying to talk me into some super bullshit on a store in Florida that wasn't doing well. And luckily I didn't say yes. But after that, it took me a lot longer to get back to fitness. But anyways, not about me. The reason I wanted to have you on and chat is just because I've said this on quite a few podcasts now. I'm always seeking out different perspectives, and you of all people have the most different perspective I've ever seen in my entire life. And I appreciate it a lot. It's very much different than the way I look at things, but at the same time, I can understand what it is that you're saying, how you're implementing it. It's just a matter of from the outside looking in, sometimes it's what the fuck is that guy doing over there? But it's then you listen to Ray explain it, and it's okay, this makes sense from what he's trying to do and what the purpose and intent of the exercise is, right? And, you know, I've had people come up to me and be like, oh, is Ray a good trainer? And I'm like, yeah, Ray's a great trainer. And the reason I say that is because it comes back to another thing I've said a lot lately is progress is the ultimate answer here, right? Like if you're getting progress from your clients, then that's what matters. That makes you a good trainer. Like, and you can't argue that you have some great athletes, like including Courage Opara, who got fourth at the Arnold this last year, right? Where did he get it at the Olympia?
At the Olympia, the highest we've gotten so far is ninth. But that'll
Okay. So, I mean, you work with Arnold competitors, you work with high-level pros, you work with high-level pros all over the place.
Courage has gotten top 5 at the Arnold multiple times, and he's an incredible athlete, just one of many that I'm fortunate to work with. And that's absolutely something that has driven my mindset. As I'm able to work with better and better athletes, I can gauge how my methods are affecting them psychologically in such a way as like, how willful are they to be doing it? And when I can see their excitement for it and no hesitancy, I know that I'm falling in line with what their body is excited to be doing. And the other way around, when I see hesitancy or issues with compliance, I know that the blame may be on my end, and I need to reevaluate that before I keep pushing and pushing. An example that has always stood out in my mind, and I almost wish I had more time with this athlete. He just didn't keep competing as of right now. But this guy, like as an athlete, top upper body was a freak, like 27-inch waist, damn near 60-inch shoulders, lats hung out of his like obnoxious tank top, nipples out and everything. Lats hung out like meat. You just walk behind him, you're like, oh my God, how is that? Like it looked like Ronnie's back. And he only did machines, and he only did about 100 reps each set, and he paced them like a stimulate, don't annihilate to the extreme. Like we'd be in the gym for 2-3 hours, and at that time, that was moronic to me. I'm like, what are you doing? That's silly. Doesn't even make sense. Let me take you over here to the dumbbells and let's fix your shit. And just thinking that I knew better because I knew exercise. But he's a specimen, so I should have thought more then. But instead, I went to do other things. And I took him over to the dumbbell rack, and he grabbed some dumbbells. And he's like, I've never used dumbbells before. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just do we're doing an incline press. And he lays back on the bench, and he takes these dumbbells back, and he drops them all the way down, and he takes them all the way up. And he drops them all the way down, and he takes them all the way up. And I'm like, whoa, we got to stop this. Hell no. and I instructed a good press, like clean, linear, nice movements, gripping chest, leaving other muscles a little bit lax and really focusing on the chest. And he adopted it, and he's okay. I trusted me, trusted training. And then I watched his bubbliness go away. Not to an extreme, but I just saw a difference. I saw a difference in his shape. I saw a difference in what I can say is good circulation. Like I saw linear movements keeping him tight or creating tension that was never there in the first place. He would get into the gym, and he would get to the lateral raise machine, and he would just 900 reps later, like just there to there. That's it. But his shoulders were fucking huge and beautiful. Biceps hung down to his forearm. I should have said, dude, I'm going to follow you around. But instead, I took him over to teach him training. And I just noticed a difference from that point. And that moment forever put really big thoughts in my mind, because until that point,
Sure.
I hadn't worked with anyone to his level. And he was a brand new amount of shape that I had never seen before. And it especially dictated its own style of movement, its own patterns, its own flow, its own desire to avoid stiffness and avoid passivity. And what
Right.
I introduced when isolating the chest was I introduced stiffness and passivity. And it again forever changed how I thought about how effective is me isolating this muscle. And it's not something I didn't
Right.
change it right then either. I just tested it. I was like, okay, this
Right.
is working for him. It's kind of working for him. It didn't work for him. Okay, it's working for him. It's working for him. It's still, and I'd realized that the higher the spectrum went, the more it wasn't as productive. And then I you ask a question. I'm gonna start.
So when you have, like, say you've got a new athlete coming on, like, what is it that you assess with them first to even get rolling with training? Like, is the way you look at training and whatnot, do you, especially like if it's an online versus an in-person, obviously in-person stuff's really easy. Like, you can see the move in person, but when you're working with somebody online or whatever, how are you setting up your programming? Basically, what are you looking when these people come in? What are you looking at to see how their body moves that will kind of give you those ideas as to how you need to train them?
So programs that I've made in the past, I have put a lot of detail into it, similar that we're talking detail that leads to good isolation, cues that lead to really getting the most out of the specific muscle that I'm planning you to utilize. And I would always have to go erase some things because after a little while, I didn't see it being functional. Now, when it comes to an online client, I take it as a beautiful opportunity to see how they are progressing before I implement cues and changes. So trusting their life has brought them to a successful series of patterns to move. The tough part about this is that we live in a world now where everyone's teaching you how to lift. And even worse, we all lack the sensation needed to know that we're doing something that's uncomfortable. And that problem, I feel honestly, is one of the biggest issues in bodybuilding right now. Like
which issue?
The lack of physical sensation that we have. Like we are able to put ourselves in positions that the body does not want to be in. And it doesn't want to be in because it goes against the balance, flow, movement, and integrity of the body. It misaligns, it pulls other parts into passivity, and essentially we become expert lifters or expert isolators rather than somebody who knows how to utilize their body as a whole. Right. And I guess one of the biggest things for me that helped, if we go back to that athlete, one of the biggest things for me that allowed me to understand him with more clarity was taking care of myself and stripping some things that allowed me to have the potential for more awareness, more proprioception, the ability for me to go in my body, and then the ability for me to also exit my body and use my body as a whole. And bringing myself further and further to a place where I could feel the interaction of muscles together versus the training of just one muscle. helped me
Right.
understand experiences in the past with other athletes where I may have looked at them like something was a little bit confusing to me. And now I understood that the integrity of their body was so strong that it dictated that movement, and where the energy lied throughout that movement for them specifically was strong in
Right.
that range. And for them, it's not even a range, it's just them moving. It's where they want to stop based on what the rest of the body says, and where they want to go to based on what the rest of the body says. And I just didn't understand it as much with a lack of feeling. And that lack of feeling stemmed from 7 meals a day with tons of food. That lack of feeling stemmed from supplement abuse, not abuse, but just supplement use. And not like,
Right.
when I say take care of myself, I got off all supplements for now nearly over 6 years. With like periodically, the one thing that I'll do is if I get my ass kicked, because I'm still training with guys, like if I get home and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't do this tomorrow, like I'll do 3 to 500 IUs at ACG, and on pace that's
Okay.
averaged out to I do that like once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that has led to be enough for me. I tried to do growth for a little while. It fucked my blood sugar up too much. And I was cranky and irritable.
Okay.
And that messed with me more than the like I felt progress immediately, but the
Mm-hmm.
side effects messed with my desire to stay on it because of how I'm choosing to go after my coaching. So it left
Right.
me less sensitive. It left me more irritable. It left me hard to handle some clients. And so I dropped that. And then there was one show that I attempted to do some D-ball, so that I didn't go to the show looking like a scientist instead of a like bodybuilding coach. And I made it 2 weeks at 12 milligrams every day. And that I was getting like strong. I felt good, but then I started feeling like
Uh-huh.
numb and just inflamed, and just ended up pulling it
Yeah,
because
I can
my
see that.
clarity had been so regulated already. And I didn't want to.
Yeah. I mean, it'll definitely change like how your brain processes everything, and like it can change that mood for sure. But so when you've got someone, you're basically, if I understand correctly, like you wait and see kind of how they move
Yeah,
already.
so
So like you look at the
I give them a
programming.
program based on what I see physically from them. But I
Okay.
don't provide instruction. Like not
Okay.
to, I have before, and I've sent big things, and like for some people I still will, because I can see it's needed. I can see they're that far down the spectrum of the whole body working together
Right.
already. Like maybe there's somebody who does an office job and they're in a chair all day, so their low back is disconnected, their scapulas are disconnected, their neck is disconnected. So for that individual, I may get them more connected to their hands. I may get them more connected to their breath. It and create cues in that sense. But for an individual who I feel is already doing things well based on how I can see them, I give them a plan that's obviously what we need to improve. Like if their back is lacking development, and their chest is awesome,
Right.
then I may favor back throughout splits. But I try not to be picky, or be picky when it comes to cues. But then once I start getting pictures and I can see how things are progressing, then I'll say, hey man, I want you to send me videos of all your back day. Or hey man, I want to see your
Okay.
squats. And that I'll start deciding now, okay, this is what's going on. This is the conversations you and I need to have. And I approach things a little bit more from a philosophy standpoint than a science standpoint. It's like what's going on with intention, what's going on with your how are you handling the environment? And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I can even say that from my perspective, like when I'm setting things up, like intention is such a thing that I see lacking in the gym, right? Because you can see, like, if one of my clients or one of your clients is in the gym with us or without us, like they have intention when they're training. With the general population, when they come in, it's just, I'm going to move some stuff, right? I'm gonna train chest. I'm just going to fucking do this, right? And there's no intention behind what they're doing. So definitely, I love that aspect there of just like drawing intention to how you set everything up, like setting up a cue to get yourself set up. How do you want to do a chest press? So like, and what does that mean? How do I set my hips? How do I set my rib cage? How do I set my shoulders? How do I set my feet? Like all of those things come into play on every movement we do, just about, right? Obviously machines will take a lot of that stuff away, but there's still some intention that needs to be put there because we can emphasize certain things by positioning ourselves in a certain manner. So it's definitely interesting that you kind of look at the intention and speak to them about that versus just go, this is how you squat. This is the intention of the squat and how we should do it, and then roll with it from there.
Yeah, no, I absolutely go into a mindset and what you are doing over like trying to be too picky about specific areas, especially more now than ever before. So what I can say too is when you're working with athletes who aren't necessarily put together, it's hard to get them moving like just with natural movement because there are so many areas of passivity. Like they have trained passivity into their body. So it becomes almost required for you to be specific. Like, this is where I want your feet. This is where I want your chest. This is it becomes almost a requirement to compartmentalize it. And that's when we spoke the other day on what we could speak about. That's actually what I had in mind when when we were at the car is I feel bodybuilding and the way we have approached bodybuilding when it comes to isolating muscles is a result from the passivity created in our environment. So our day-to-day life, like we're bent over a piece of paper, we're on our phone, like we're not picking apples, we're not climbing rocks. There's very little whole body extension going on, especially if you're not making it happen. Like there's little to none. Like very few people even wake up and stretch anymore. It's just they roll out of bed.
Right.
And with that passivity riddled throughout the body, now the thought of moving as one is a concept that's not obtainable. And moving as one when that is going on is opening up an extreme window for injury. So let's just bring it back to someone sitting on an office chair all day. So both feet are in front of them, body is forward, low back is rounded, intention is in the computer. It's not even I'm looking at a screen where you regulate your body with looking at a screen. Like the difference between me drifting into you versus me right here is, oh no, I'm looking at this screen, not I'm in your room with you. And that's like the difference in how much intention can change structure and function of the body. So if I have somebody who has a very passive low back and then I put them on rows and I tell them to move, then this movement can be extremely damaging to a low back that's already in flexion, and so already in passive flexion and then moving forward. This is just too much traction, too very, very little pressure within the abdomen, no diaphragm helping out, and it opens up a window for injury. And I feel instead of what we should have done at that time and say, why are all the things in the middle broken? I think as an industry, we went, how can I isolate this muscle? and keep myself away from injury. And I think that's how we adopted very still positions while moving. And in that, we are getting into the muscle that we intend on training. And depending on how well you're able to do this, it's very effective. But it's still, in my mind, doesn't utilize what our body is after when it comes to movement. It compartmentalizes things too much. And when
and
yeah, go ahead. I was just to say, when biology is isolated, the consequence is dysfunction. You isolate cells, and that's cancer. You isolate individual muscles when it comes to passivity, and that's injuries along that whole chain of muscles. Like we all know that
sure, I can see that.
You can have an issue in your knee and it gives you back pain. You can have an issue in your shoulder and your wrist hurts. Like there are so many muscles have such a tight connection that if you aren't in line with the web and you're choosing to just do one thing, then your body has to learn how to do this one thing without interfering with any of this. But
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and then what I was going to say is like with the sport that we do and that we both work in, like it is all about presentation. At the end of the day, like how you present on stage is what matters. So like what's happening in the gym, like if at least from what you're saying in your perspective of this is like, if I'm locking everything down and being very strict and like body's not able to flow kind of the way it needs to, when you go to try and pose on stage, the presentation's not going to be there as well. So like just getting the body to flow together as one unit can now start to create better presentation.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that's a big part of this here is like making sure that people are aware that the lens that you have, especially when it comes to posing and stuff, is more about making everything move as a unit and getting your body to move in directions together, right? It's just naturally trying to do those things. So like it would make no sense for you to try and get somebody to move naturally on a stage if you're not having them move naturally while they're training.
Absolutely.
So I can completely understand that as well. The one thing that I would just rebuttal just to give you my end of it, right, is like, because I do the stuff that's more isolated, more restricted and that kind of thing. But I think part of the issue is like, when we start to hyper focus on trying to fully isolate, like 100%, because then it starts to become these little short, choppy things. Everything else is really rigid. Everything else is really passive or whatever you want to call it. And it starts to create issues in other areas, right? So the thing that I have tried to do with my training is like, yes, I still use the isolation, but I allow myself to move a little bit more fluidly into the different ends of range of motion, right? So I set up certain cues and drive myself in a certain manner, but allow everything else to kind of move freely, right? In the best way that I can still work that specific muscle. So like, to get a little bit more back into the nitty gritty of your training and stuff, like if you have an athlete come to you, like we both know when we look at people on stage, some of the areas that tend to be pretty lacking is the posterior. Like we can't see it. We don't have a great connection with it. Most people are just kind of shooting in the dark when it comes to training back, training glutes, training hamstrings, right? So if you have somebody come to you that's missing some of these things, in your manner of, like, let's say back, right? We'll focus specifically on back. And when we look at these backs, most people aren't missing traps, right? Most people are missing lats. Like that tends to be the development issue, like lower lats. That's what everybody wants is lower lats. And they're all trying to find a different position where they can hit their lower lats better. So like if you have somebody come to you like this and you have a client that is coming that needs lower back or lower lat like that, how do you go about setting up exercises so that they can get into that area and actually build that specifically?
Yeah. So if I see that the connection from like the top and the bottom of their lat is not aligned, I go after the route of what part of their foundation is messing with this ability to connect. And For some people, like usually if somebody is, I'm jumping on. So let me just say what you're asking. For the individual who is having a tough time keeping engagement through their lower back, I tend to notice with them that their lower back has an absence of natural curvature, and that the
Okay.
abdominals in front of that area are very passive and weak. And that lower abdomen area isn't regulating itself for height. It's more so controlling flexion well. And if we want to use stereotypes as an example, because it like we look at bodies on stage, we can do this. If I have an Asian guy on stage, he's going to have thick erectors, very shallow low back, big quads. If I see an African guy on stage, not like African American, but African, I'm going to see a very tall low back, almost so much that their core is overpowering the rest of their body in a not bodybuilder, more athlete kind of way. And
Okay.
that would be an example of the spectrum between an individual who lives in more extension, and when they sit up, they have to, without letting anything roll, and the individual who's just able to roll up and put their back in complete flexion. And
Okay.
instead of now going after exercises for a low back, because all of your back exercises have the potential through parts of the range to be any part of the back, depending on how you're
Sure.
moving through that range.
The execution.
Absolutely. But where it has the biggest impact on you is where you're fundamentally stable. So if I'm super stable throughout my clavicle, upper rib cage, my traps and my shoulders and my upper back are going to be dominant. And then, so this is real stable, and now I have very poor stability in my low back. Everything through there is going to be very passive. It has to be. If it
Okay.
was too stable, if those muscles were strong, and that person chooses to move like that, they're going to tear something. Something is going to get injured.
Okay.
The body has made the necessary concessions, or the environment has beaten them up into a passive situation over time, that this area has chosen to relax muscles. Like not that the body has specifically decided in all situations, but something has created a what we could say is a disability of that tissue. And
Right. So basically, if I understand correctly, it sounds like you're looking for common threads in like a day-to-day activity of like, do they sit, do they stand, do they move all, and then trying to narrow down what area is not active that's causing the rest of the body to not be able to tap into that muscle.
yeah,
Is that kind of what you're saying
yeah,
there?
and
Okay.
and
Cool.
as like initially I won't be so aggressive with their day, because some people sit really well. Some people, how well they sit is why they have awesome abs. But usually those people also have like the tightest hips and no quad definition. Like they have beautiful abs that they can move around freely, but their thighs are just so pulled tight from that the fold of that hip flexor that there's
Right.
no life there. And that person does notice, like what I've noticed with clients, when I have an athlete like that, if I get them more grounded, their legs start opening back up, and the tissue that was tight due to sitting is now opened up. So now another way to look at that is, if I didn't have that thought and I looked at it as his legs are fat and I dieted him down to his leg tension, now one, I've taken away his shape. Like he no longer can win the shape game because his legs and his waist are nowhere near each other. And
Makes
then
sense.
two, everything that's tight and that I forced into that position is getting terrible circulation. It already was, and all of that tissue up top was creating life. And now I've ripped and pulled that tissue away. That's that soft tissue that allowed for good circulation. And the side effect for that person is going to be dreaming about food, constant cravings, binging, because the body is nowhere near a place to accomplish dieting in that regard. It's now such a negative factor for the body that they're fucking dreaming about cheesecake and watching the Food Network because it's getting them excited. But
Right.
which that happens for the best of the best people as well. So don't say that. But like you're great athletes at the last stages of prep are still like watching the Food Network. Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
God. But
I don't do that. I can't do that shit to myself.
dude, it's
I can't watch food stuff. I don't know how people scroll
dude,
through Instagram.
I
looking at
used to be
food.
there.
I can't. I don't. I can't.
I
I
I've
can't.
been there before. I've pulled off show preps in 4 weeks. I know what crash dieting's like, and I know what gaining 40 pounds in a day is like. Like I've
Not in a day, but I've gained 40 pounds in a short period of time. Yes.
yeah, it was a bad deal. But the other side effect to that level of force and causing areas to start collapsing on themselves is the rebound. Now your body
Right.
has a reason to once your goal is over, your psyche changes. And that psyche goes from I have this goal to I want to live. And now this person can't control their fucking eating. They have no ability to regulate all the shit that they're putting in their mouth, and for good reason, because they're so far from an optimal place that their body is looking for any way to put a crazy amount of inflammation in these compromised areas so that it can get some life back. And that can ruin an athlete. Like someone who has the potential to be great, over dieted the first time around, like they can be done right there. Like their
Yeah.
structure,
Oh,
their
100%.
structure can change forever.
Man. I mean,
Right.
like, I'm sure you doing this as long as you have, like, you've seen the number of things that other trainers that we might even know have done to people where it's like, what are you doing? And like, look, there's a different, we have to look at things different when it comes to the last couple of weeks of prep. Like,
Yeah.
most people are probably going to be on poverty calories. But if you're fucking starting 16 weeks out and you're on poverty calories, and they're going to have you licking the outside of an apple by the time you get done, you can guarantee there's going to be some sort of dysfunction,
Yeah.
right? So from your perspective, typically, well, we all have dysfunction. So I'm assuming most people, when they come to you, are already dysfunctional,
Most.
right? So you first try to tackle the dysfunction, find the areas where they are creating dysfunction, whether it's sitting in a chair or typing in whatever it is, right? Whatever the dysfunction may be, whatever pattern that they're creating on a daily basis. And then you try to does your program first structure around waking those areas back up and fixing those problems, or like how do you go about doing that?
It just went 3, 2, 1 because someone tried to call me.
Oh, okay. Well, you're back on now. Could you hear what I was saying?
Say the question again. Sorry.
So when somebody comes to you, basically we all have dysfunctions and stuff. Are you creating the program first around fixing those dysfunctions and then building the program out from there once the dysfunction has started to alleviate itself? Or is it kind of something that you're always looking at different dysfunctions?
Yeah, so I personally create my programs for regulation because in my mind and my experience has taught me that an athlete's or a client's ability to regulate themselves is going to dictate their compliance on plan. So, for example, if my athlete does have a tough time it's very close to what you're saying in terms of their lifestyle. But instead of me going after their lifestyle initially, I tend to give rituals, routines, practices that will ensure if they do have a lifestyle that's compromising, this will help. This will counterbalance what's
Okay.
going on. That way I'm not
Makes sense.
I'm not immediately attacking somebody's lifestyle. Just because
Sure.
it's hard. Like some people have to work in a computer chair all day. They don't even get to have a standing desk. They don't even get to have an option. So I try to attack it in that way. What can easily happen at that point, though, is that I've given them something overwhelming, and I've done that in the past where I just want to give them all the goodies and let them enjoy it. And instead, they open the program and they go, how many hours does he think is in my fucking day? Because I
can imagine.
enjoy those practices, and the athletes that follow them, I know which ones do because they tell me about how changed their psyche and their day is, how much of an improvement they feel in so many aspects. And it's just getting them in positions that they should be getting into, but they aren't. And then
Give me some examples. Give me some examples of what you mean by rituals.
Yeah, so I have one that's called floor dwelling. And I give them a specific amount of time that I legitimately want them to lay on the floor. From that point, I will start getting specific with people. So I'll tell people, I want you to lay on the floor and massage your hips. I want you to lay on the floor and roll back to front. So like I could get specific, but starting off for most, it's I want you to lay on the floor and just hang out there. Like whatever ends up happening for you, whatever you instinctively start to go for. And if not, I at least put them elongated on either their back or their belly, hanging out on the floor so they're not folded over something. And that little bit of time each day has the potential to create a desire to do more things like that. Once your body is introduced to something that it likes, it wants to do more of it. It loves it. Like I am in a big belief that, and this is kind of like a Platonic view, like I'm a Platonist, but I do believe that the body is looking for its best option, but it only knows what it knows. So its best like for a obese individual with very, very poor foundation and reflexive potential, the best option for them to regulate is a Twinkie. Because all of the areas on their body that are passive have now just been inflamed and blown out. And now they have this Michelin suit of processed food they're wearing, and they're walking around in it. And the second a little bit of that inflammation goes down, they snack. And a little bit goes down, they snack. And that individual, if you try to say, okay, we're going to get on this diet, we're going to get you thin. And they're every ounce of their body wants to get thin. And you put them on this low inflammic diet that they lose 10 pounds in the first week. And they're like, oh, thank you, Nick. I love you. And you're like, I'm so great. And then they start cheating and they start snacking and they eat this and they eat that and they eat this and they eat that. And initially they're apologetic and then eventually they don't give a fuck anymore. They just want to keep eating. And in my feelings, that is because the diet isn't better for them. Where they physically are currently, the diet's a problem. The diet is crushing the inflammation that has spackled them together. They don't have erectors keeping their low back secure. They don't have rhomboids keeping their shoulders back. They have soft, passive body all over. And you rid them of their airbag, their safety net, and you are now the devil. But for that individual, if you put together a solid diet with a ton of inflammic, healthy food, like fucking tomatoes and Ezekiel bread and all these nice oats and just Like maybe even fucking put an eggplant on there. Tons of cashews. Like there's like nightshades and high inflammic vegetables, like things that are going to inflame them, but a little bit more positively than the yodel and the cereal. And combine that with a new ritual of planking 7 times a day. 7 times a day, I want you to get in a plank as long as you can. When you're done, you're done. Later on that day, do it again. Later on that day, do it again. You are now reinforcing the good patterns with good food, and you are not taking them away from their problems. Like, you are treating their problems, and you are creating a foundation, and now you start seeing progress, and they still have adherence, and now you add.
No,
Try to call.
You're still there.
3, 2, 1 for me again. So I can't put my phone on Do Not Disturb because my wife could have a baby at any moment. So.
Oh, good.
I did that originally. I put on Do Not Disturb, and then I pulled your thing up, and my psyche was like, "You can't do that. you're gonna get this,
that might be a bad idea.
Text, like,
don't get me in trouble.
It
okay?
was all Nick's fault.
No, the fuck it wasn't.
No,
but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just the way you describe that there. I mean, all of us walk around with inflammation for sure, and that's if they don't have the musculature to hold themselves up because they have gotten to that point. Yeah, that's probably a great way to handle it. And again, your perspective coming back to like, what minor things can we shift to support the good and start to get rid of the bad? Because I think a big, I don't know if you want to call it problem, or when it comes to trying to help a new client, it's like you want to take your method and fucking hit them with it, right? And it's like, this is the perfect way to do this. This is this training style and this diet and that, and you're not considering their day-to-day habits and what they do on a regular basis, right? If you're not taking those things in and going, okay, if I completely 180 them, we might have a problem, right? But if I slowly turn them a couple of degrees a day, and now we're getting to 180, now it's a different story, right? Because it's like, we don't have to make somebody change like that, right?
And sometimes that's very hard when that person's right in front of you as a coach or a trainer. You're like, you're telling me the finish line you want. I see your finish line in your future, but I have to get you step by step, or you're going to leave.
Right.
Or you're just not going to accomplish your goal.
Because we know what perfect is, right? Like, this is perfect. We know where this client is, and there's all this space in between, right? And now how well can that person go from where they are to perfect?
Yeah. So question.
And how fast?
Where in bodybuilding, where do you see perfect?
That's such an individual thing, like perfect is, again, like I said at the beginning, perfect is progress. Perfect is progress in that individual movement, right?
I get what you mean there, but if I had to say, give me 4 people.
Are you talking about the physiques?
Yeah, give me 4 physiques of like any realm. Like they could be bodybuilders now, they could be no bodybuilders. Like, who are your
the first 2 that come to mind, and I can only think of 2 would be Phil Heath and oh Jesus Christ,
Ronnie. Not Ronnie.
No, I mean, yes, Ronnie, but like
Phil Heath is,
in my head,
Phil Heath is still a great answer.
Go ahead. Yeah. Why am I Flex Wheeler? Jesus Christ. Flex Wheeler. I don't know why that took me so long to say it, but yeah, like, I mean, obviously Ronnie's the GOAT, but when I think perfect, right? Like, I'm looking at the flow of a body, like the symmetry on every shot and everything from top to bottom. And we can certainly say, especially later in his career, Ronnie was not exactly a symmetrical human in most poses, right? and a lot of that comes from just the way he posed in general. So like when I look at perfect, I'm thinking about full presentation, the way it looks top to bottom, all that stuff. So I would say Phil Heath and Flex Wheeler would be my two first that come to mind.
I agree. Yes, if I was giving a top five, those two would absolutely be in the top five. Now, what would you say about their training styles?
It's definitely more machine based. They're both more high volume. They're both just kind of moving weights. Like it's very opposite of how I train, where it's like much more low volume. It's a mix of free weights and machines. It's lower intensity, but just moving a lot.
Yeah, and then if you were to give, if I tied your hands behind your back and pointed a gun to your head and said, "Give me two more names, motherfucker," what two more names would you give me?
Let's say Flex Lewis, and we'll put Ronnie in there.
So, what are their training styles like?
The same, similar. I mean, Ronnie is the ultimate as far as high volume and moving stuff around. Yeah.
So, in my mind, if I'm trying to Tony Robbins this situation and study the best to be the best, they are showing how they want to train. And that's the body dictating it. The body is saying,
sure,
hey, this is how I want to move. Now, people have tried to tell me how to move all the time, but this is how I want to move. I've been taught from everybody, but this is how I want to move. And they are examples of complete structures. Like they are head to toe together. Like to the point where sometimes it's too much. Like Phil is so together, but has just enough flexion to make his back really freaky, because it makes that little extra curvature. And now he has extra thickness in his low back as a side effect. And then he has a little issue with a hernia in the front, created by the energy going that way. So the energy came through the belly and pushed out the front. Same deal, like now reverse it with Flex. And the energy for him is going back and his chest is down. And now he's a complete body, but the energy is still going somewhere. And now how many issues did Flex have with his kidneys? And where is Flex currently now with issues that were caused by circulation? So like we can take inferences based on the athlete's career history of the side effects that were present amongst individuals of that, the same way we can look at training styles. And then Ronnie is just
because you're creating restriction and stuff.
Yeah. So that was something that was very hard for me, because I hadn't felt that since I first started training. But from the very beginning of me first starting to train, I learned how to train. Like I had muscle and fitness books. I had anatomy textbooks. I was writing out workouts, like sitting on my notebook and writing out workouts was like my favorite thing to do. Like I had just books and books of workouts. And I made it a very scientific thing without the understanding that I was making it a scientific thing, because I was operating from my brain more than I was my body. And my brain wasn't using my body. It was searching on the outside for ways to do things without knowing what was best. It was just searching. It was putting out a spotlight and, oh, that looks nice, let me try. That looks nice, let me try. And what we always go back to, those of us who have embodied scientific lifting, and I guess we could call it scientific lifting, is we always looked at the best of the best and said they were anomalies. They're just genetic freaks. If I wonder how good they could have been if they did it like this, like things like that. But then when I got to work with athletes of that caliber, not this like that, that caliber, but higher, like higher than what I was working with, I saw more of what was going on. And I began to look at things as overall one unit of energy, and this energy being the whole body, and how this energy interacts with other things. And now how well you are foundationally put together decides if this interaction is going to be beautiful, decides if this interaction is going to give you a fucking gut, decides if this interaction is going to break your back. But it wants to move. And instead of addressing foundation, we made lifting scientific. And for a lot of people, it does a lot of good. It just doesn't, in my mind, cross that boundary. It
Sure.
adds too much passivity into some movements to allow that person to be one body. And when we look at,
Sure. So
I was to say, when we look at people on stage, like our terms for shape, our terms for aesthetics is how well they are one body. So if I'm squeezing biceps and squeezing lats and squeezing a thigh, like I'm no longer one body, I'm a bunch of compartments. And then you see somebody who looks more constipated and struggling, then you see an aesthetic individual. So that this game becomes more of a game for the naturally blessed than the goal of creating your best package as a whole.
Sure. Yeah. So like, if we can put a bow on all this to wrap this up for everybody, it seems to me like a lot of the way you program now almost came from your perspective of just the body moving by looking at posing, right? So at least from my perspective, that seems like, so like you saw how.
I was saying when you said that before, like that was an insight to me. I was like, I'm sure posing had a lot to do with my shift in training, just being around more athletes. And I had already embodied that style or that method for my posing, and then my training butted heads with that.
That makes sense. Yeah. And so the biggest thing here is like from the outsider perspective, and obviously you've got your own, like you could rant on your version of training forever. I know, like we've had long discussions before, but like basically it seems like it's just centered around the presentation of bodybuilding, right? It's centered around what bodybuilding actually is at the end of the day, which is presenting your body, right? And yes, we need to grow particular muscles, but when we go to build that muscle and pose it, like, how do we make that pose look better, not just the muscle bigger? Because just because the muscle's bigger doesn't necessarily mean you will be able to present it better, which doesn't necessarily help you, right? Because if you're 10 pounds better or 10 pounds bigger and wherever, but now I can't externally rotate my shoulder, like you're going to have a problem, right? So like, how can you make that more fluid and everything working together? Does that kind of put a little bow on it to tie it all together?
That's a beautiful way to put that together right now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the last final takeaway here, and you can put in something if you like, is like just learning to get outside of the same thinking that everybody else has, right? Because it's like, how can I now take that same thought process that you have with training and kind of mingle it in with mine, right? It's not like I don't have to be a shitty copy of Ray Baker, but I could be an improved version of Nick Bagley by taking some stuff from you, right? So it's like, by looking at the way, I think the better way to understand your methodology when it comes to all of this stuff is to first look at your methodology with posing. And it's very much about everything moving in unison and not forcing things into positions. So same thing, it makes sense that you would fall into that same narrative when it comes to how you build the body to begin with. Because if you make the body rigid over here and then you ask it to be fluid over here, it's not going to work.
during the
You know,
time period where isolation was my thing, I, Ian, to give you an example, Ian would make a joke. He'd be like, "Ray Baker, fuck you up with a paperclip," and I could have somebody take a 5 pound weight and fucking trash a lat. Like their fucking lat is shaking and it's fucking pulsing. And they're like, "Oh my God, I've never felt my lat so good in my entire life." And I'm like, "Yeah." And then a month later, I look at their bicep and it's tight as fuck. I'm like, "God damn it." Yeah.
That's funny. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on, man. We'll definitely have to do some more and try to get into some more specifics there. I don't want to take the episode too long.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody actually listens. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, dude. We'll definitely do this again soon.
I appreciate it. See ya.
Appreciate you, buddy.